What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Friday, August 15th edition of the Ship My Money Show. I'm your host, Adam Scherer. You can follow me on Twitter at ShipMyMoney DFS. 12-game MLB slate tonight. Doesn't look like we have any real weather concerns, so that's nice. We do have a game in Coors Field, which kind of sucks because the Rockies are bad enough outside of Coors Field. But at least there's 11 other games, makes strategy interesting. And, kind of talked about it yesterday with the 5-game slate that had Coors. On these bigger slates, the downside is there's probably going to be some random dude that hits 3 home runs and you're absolutely dead if you don't have him. But the nice part is you can actually play lineups that you feel good about. You can not worry about ownership quite as much as you have to on the smaller slate. So there are trade-offs. I think 12-game slates are relatively fun. Obviously, you're not likely to win a tournament regardless of the slate size. So there's pros and cons to any of them. But going to go through game by game as usual, talking about each game using the Run the Sims projections that you see on the screen. If you want to use these in your own process, the link is in the description below. You can still use promo code UDAMLB and get 10% off. We never deactivated that code, at least as far as I know. So go ahead and keep using it. Also, maybe more importantly, given the time of the year, promo code EARLYBIRD gets you 15% off any of our NFL packages. And that is 15% off forever. As long as you don't cancel, you are locked in at that price. So take advantage of that. The link is also in the description below. The NFL stuff is the first basically full product that we've rolled out as a team. Nerdy Tenor, Brick 75, Utical, myself. We obviously have the MLB projections, but we don't have an MLB sim. We have a golf sim, but we don't have golf projections. But NFL was obviously the focus for us. There was already infrastructure in place when we acquired Run the Sims, and we've done some stuff on the back end to make it ours, to make it better, improve the functionality of the Sims, the accuracy of the Sims. The projections will be ours. I will be heavily involved in that, which I'm actually excited about. I've never had my thumb too much on the pulse of the projections at any site that I've worked at. It's pretty much been, I'll point out if I really disagree with something or I think something is clearly off, but I've never been super involved in the process. So I'm excited to do more of that. I think it'll make me better at DFS. If you use them and do shitty, you can just blame Nerdy because he worked on the Sims and not me for the projections. But in addition, obviously I think I'll be more stressed out because people are going to be using my projections and I'm gonna have to spend time on them. But I am looking forward to that from a personal level, but mostly just excited to have a full NFL product that, we've worked on, that we're happy with. Obviously we're still looking to improve anything that we can. But I think there's really a package for anybody, regardless of how much DFS you play, whether you're into sports betting or whatever. Our cheapest package, I've mentioned it before, we honestly screwed up the pricing, but $25 a month, you get access to our DFS projections, optimizer, and you can sim up to 5 lineups at a time. If you're playing single entry or 3 max, it's great. If you aggregate projections, I don't think you can access anybody's projections in the industry really for cheaper than $25 a month. That's where I think honestly we screwed it up, but it is what it is. If you are looking to prop bet, $39 a month gets access to our underdog tool, prize picks tool, prop sniper tool, which is just a general, market tool that uses our projections. Bryson said, can you export the $25 NFL projections package? Yeah. That's like, if as somebody that in the past has aggregated projections from different sites, anybody that's done that, the biggest issue is that, especially now that all these Sims products exist, most sites charge you for the Sims product and they don't have like a separate projections package. So you end up paying hundreds of dollars a month if you're trying to aggregate projections. That's you can take them, do whatever you want with them, put them in somebody else's sim, put them into, an aggregate model, whatever you want to do. I think that's a really good value. And then obviously we have the normal stuff. We have a Sims package that you can sim, however many lineups really you need, up to 10,000 for the classic slate, 50,000, I think it is for Showdown. We have an add-on with Shady Advice's portfolio optimizer. If that's something that you want to use to minimize risk, to help you diversify your lineups, etc. Really, I think if there's anything you're looking for, we have something that suits you. And again, Endgame gets you 15% off whatever you sign up for, and it's good as long as you don't cancel. Endgame is good until August 31st. Jake said, shame on Davis for coming up with the marketing strategy where he makes you call your partners morons for setting low prices. No, that was really, we all kind of just realized it at the same time. That it wasn't by design. It was really just we probably should have made this higher, but nothing we can do about it now. Landon said, how involved is Yuta in projections? He'll be involved. Like, I know that our general process is going to be me and Davis and maybe Brian going in early in the week and setting stuff up on like Tuesday. And then I think Yuta's planning on coming in on like Friday. I know he wants to. One thing that's nice about our projections too is that they are customizable. I don't think that exists anywhere else, but you can either use our stuff or you can go in and adjust, market shares for running backs, wide receivers, whatever. If you kind of disagree with our inputs, and it'll take our model and then sim with your changed inputs and spit out projections for you. So you can do that. But also one nice thing about it is that you can also adjust like how often you think teams are going to throw, run, what the score is, etc. So I know Yuta he thinks he has an edge as far as coach tendencies go and, pass percentage, run percentage, all of that. So I know he plans on messing with that stuff, adjusting that stuff. And then basically I think the plan is later in the week, Friday, Saturday, for us to circle back with Yuta and just, go through everything. So we're all going to be involved in it. And I'm definitely looking forward to that. Again, I think on a personal level, it'll make me better at NFL DFS. So I'm excited for that. But anyway, promo code EARLYBIRD, 15% off, link in the description below. Go sign up. There's something there that'll fit what you're trying to do, I think. Also, our Discord is free. That link also in the description below, but I'll put that out there as well. So you can jump in there, whether you end up signing up or not. Anyway, getting into baseball now. That's the most self-promotion I think I've ever done. Getting into baseball now. Texas taking on the Blue Jays in Toronto, about a 4 total for Toronto, slightly north of 4 for Texas. On the mound for the Rangers, we have Jacob deGrom. On the mound for the Blue Jays, we have Chris Bassett. And this is kind of one of those spots that's just a really good example of how things change when you have 12 games on a slate. There are plenty of times where Jacob deGrom is a huge priority. There's plenty of times where Chris Bassett is a big priority. I don't really see either of them as a huge priority here. deGrom's getting 11% ownership. Bassett's getting 6%. Personally, for me right now, I'm even lower than that. I have 3% deGrom, 1% Bassett. But they're both just kind of guys on this slate. Very, very difficult strikeout matchup for deGrom. That's really, what is holding him back here is this matchup with the Blue Jays. Overall this season, 27% strikeout percentage for deGrom. Still very good. Not as good as last year. 110 stuff plus grade is down from last year, but still excellent. 107 location plus grade. Worse than last year, still excellent. He is still a very, very, very good pitcher, even if he's not what he was last year or certainly, at his peak. But he is $10,300. He is facing a Blue Jays team that is very difficult to strike out. Their active roster against right-handed pitching this year ranks last in strikeout percentage. So he does have that working against him. If you can get to him, fine. There are other pay-up options that I prefer on this slate and that the field prefers, but he's clearly a really good pitcher. He's probably getting 10, 11% ownership. So if I end up with a little bit more by lock, I'm not going to be upset about it. But he's not the same level of priority on this slate that he is on a lot of others. And it's really the same thing here with Bassett at 8,400. He's a good pitcher, but there's just so many pitchers on this slate. There's going to be some that look better from a raw projection standpoint. There's going to be some that look better from a value standpoint. And I've said it a million times in the past. That's really how you qualify whether or not somebody's a priority, I think, is, are they one of the highest raw projections on the slate? If not, are they one of the best point per dollar projections? And if the answer to both of those is no, they can be a perfectly fine play, but it's somebody that probably isn't going to be a huge priority because they're not checking off either one of those two boxes. And that's really what you see with Bassett here. He looks perfectly fine on a lot of slates. You would probably want a lot of him. On this one, it's just kind of if he ends up in some lineups, fine. If he doesn't, also fine. There's going to be a lot of guys that just look similar to him, I think. Overall this season, striking out 22% of hitters in 132 innings pitched, 3.77 xFIP. Good pitcher, just I think pretty much correctly priced at 8,400. Moving over to the bats here, I wouldn't expect anything to really look like a priority offensively in this game either. You have two good pitchers going in DeGrom and Bassett. Starting on the Texas side, 5% projected ownership to Corey Seager and to $2,300 Jock Peterson. Everybody else projected for less ownership than that. I'm getting to 5% Langford, Seager, Semien, Peterson, Smith. So small amounts of the Rangers here, pretty much in line with the field, more or less. So far this season, Chris Bassett allowing a 182 expected ISO to lefties with a 21% strikeout percentage, only a 134 expected ISO to righties, 24% strikeout percentage. So you do prefer left-handed bats here. That points you towards Seager. Peterson sucks, but he is cheap. Josh Smith is only 3,800. You do get stolen base upside with Langford, who's relatively cheap at 4K. Marcus Semien is still inexpensive at 3,700. So it is a decent value stack with some upside here against right-handed pitching this season. 164 expected ISO for Smith, 204 for Langford, 283 for Seager, 145 for whatever Jock Peterson is now. Semien is at 158 after a horrible start to the season. So you have had the Rangers, some of them individually not living up to expectations this year, but as a whole, they are an inexpensive stack. They do have talent in their lineup. So that's why they're showing up a little bit, but clearly not going to be a true priority here. On the Toronto side, an even more difficult matchup for them against DeGrom. I have 1% Vlad Guerrero. I have 1% Nathan Lucas leading off. That's it for me. I have sub 1% ownership projections on everybody on the Blue Jays. I think it's one of the most difficult teams to get to. Like, they have quality hitters, but Jacob DeGrom, still very, very good. If we look at his splits just to see if anything stands out as far as weaknesses, he has allowed a 194 expected ISO to lefties this year. So he is giving up some power to left-handed hitters. He's also striking them out 30% of the time. He's striking righties out 24% of the time, but the expected ISO drops to 133. So if you had to single something out, I guess it would be left-handed power. But really, if you insist on playing the Blue Jays, I would just go to either the cheapest, like Lucas, leading off, or the best, like Vlad Guerrero. But mostly, I would probably just not mess with the Blue Jays here. Seattle taking on the Mets in New York. I think Seattle changed their lineup as I was building, so I haven't actually seen what, if anything, changed. I just saw the underdog alert saying like updated Seattle lineup. But we have Luis Castillo going for the Mariners. We have Sean Manaea on the mound for the Mets. $7,900 price tag on Manaea, getting 15% ownership. 8,600 on Castillo, getting 4%. I don't have any Castillo. We are more bearish on Castillo than the industry, and the industry in general doesn't love him here. It is a tough matchup against the Mets, tough strikeout matchup, good offense overall, but you're also getting Castillo out of T-Mobile Park, and I think we're at a point in Luis Castillo's career that really, really matters. Like, obviously, it's going to matter in general when you take a pitcher out of the best place to pitch in baseball and you put him somewhere else. But for Castillo, we've just seen a drop-off in him, over the years where he's getting older. His stuff isn't quite as good. The strikeout stuff isn't quite as good. Coming into today, 20.9% strikeout percentage overall this season. He struck out 24% of hitters last year. His stuff plus grade is down 5.5 points this year. But if you look at his home road splits, it's even more drastic. He has like a 23.5% strikeout percentage at home compared to like a 17.5% strikeout percentage on the road, 4.5 xFIP on the road, like 3.7 or something at home. So, home road splits can be noisy, but when you're talking about somebody like Castillo that is kind of moved into like that just sort of average-ish pitcher in terms of stuff and strikeout percentage, and that he's pitching his home games in T-Mobile Park, it makes perfect sense for home road splits to line up like that. If it were the opposite, if it were like Luis Castillo is terrible at home in the best park in baseball and he's great on the road, then you should kind of look at something like that more skeptically and be like, okay, this doesn't make any logical sense. Maybe it's, kind of an Aaron Nola type thing where it just is what it is. Nola's been better at home than on the road basically throughout his career, despite pitching in a hitter-friendly park. But that's the minority, and you really need like a large sample size to buy into that. But when they make perfect sense, you have a pitcher in Castillo that is okay, and he's not very good outside of the best place to pitch in baseball, and he is good in the best place to pitch. It makes perfect sense. But now you're getting him in Citi Field against the Mets. So that was a lot to say about somebody that nobody's playing anyway. But he does have drastic home road splits here. He is in a tough matchup against the Mets. For Manaea, I'm actually getting like 2x the field right now. I have 31% at 7,900, Fields at 15%. Strikeout stuff so far has been very good for Manaea, striking out 20 or decent. It actually has come down a little bit. Striking out 23% of hitters. He was at 25% last year. 100 stuff plus grade in 23 innings pitched this year. Actually double checking to make sure that I updated these numbers, but he's in games that he has started, he's thrown 23 innings, 23% strikeout percentage. Stuff plus has been average. The Mariners lineup is obviously dangerous. People pointed out in chat the change was Garver starting in place of Naylor. So getting Naylor out of the lineup is nice, even though it is replacing a lefty with a righty. Manaea does have the ability to strike righties out. Overall this year, including his time in his one relief appearance, 26.5% strikeout percentage against righties, 25% against lefties. If you go back to last year, 24% against righties. So he can strike righties out. He has allowed a 162 expected ISO to righties this year. I certainly don't think this is like the safest spot or anything like that, but I do think he's just a little bit underpriced at 7,900 for the upside that he can give you here. The Mariners, again, they're a dangerous lineup. They have a lot of really good hitters. They got even better at the deadline. You still have, even without Naylor, you have a Rosarena, you have Raleigh, you have Rodriguez, you have Suarez. But then the bottom of the lineup here is weaker. You know, you have Dominic Canzone batting fifth, lefty. You have Garver, who, yeah, he has some power, but he's not Josh Naylor. Donovan Solano is tough to strike out, but he's not a super dangerous hitter. You get a left-handed Crawford batting eighth. You get a left-handed Young batting ninth. So I do think that if Manaea can kind of just navigate his way through 1 through 4, you do start to get some more favorable matchups throughout the rest of the lineup. So that, you know, is nice for him. But mostly I think it's a pricing thing and just a pretty high ceiling for him at 7,900. So I am a bit over the field on him, at least right now. For the bats on the Seattle side, not much ownership coming in here. Cal Raleigh getting 2%. Randy Rosarena getting 2%. Josh Naylor was actually my highest owned Mariner at 4%. Obviously, that won't be the case anymore. But the point stands that I'm not getting to much Seattle. I had 3% Raleigh, 3% Rodriguez, 2% Suarez. If you go to Seattle here, I think it's simply they have good hitters, especially at the top of their lineup. You get the best hitting catcher in baseball. You get one of the best hitting third basemen in baseball. So there is obviously upside, but it's a 12-game slate. So there's 23 other offenses. A lot of them are going to be facing pitchers that are worse than Sean Manaea. On the other side, for the Mets, about a 4.5 total here as well. I'm getting a little bit more than the field, but not quite as much as I expected to, given that I know that we are lower on Castillo than a lot of the industry. Obviously, that means we're probably going to be higher on the Mets than a lot of the industry offensively. But even with that, I'm not getting too much. The highest owned Mets right now, you're getting like 4% ownership to Juan Soto. You're getting around 3% to Lindor, McNeil, Nimmo, Mauricio. For me, I'm getting to 7% Soto, 6% Lindor, 4 to 5% McNeil, Alonso, Vientos, Mullins. So like I'm over the field when they're 1-2% owned, but they're still not, the Mets still aren't, at least right now, a huge part of my night. And that's fine. Like, again, there's still plenty of other offenses. You have Coors Field. So I kind of thought that I'd have a little bit more Mets than I do, but it is what it is. Overall this year, 178 expected ISO to righties for Castillo, 163 to lefties. As I mentioned before, he has struggled more outside of T-Mobile, had that 4.5 xFIP that I mentioned. From a power standpoint, he has allowed he's actually allowed more home runs at home, which is weird. 1.1 home runs per 9 at home compared to 0.8 on the road. That's unusual. Righties, 1.1 home runs allowed per 9 on the road compared to at home. Lefties on the road have just done like nothing against him, which again is very, very weird. He has a 5.15 xFIP against lefties on the road. So you probably just will see more home runs going forward. That is a split that just doesn't make any sense. And it's a relatively small sample size. So eventually it probably will just go the way that it normally does. Basically, just I would play the best Mets. You're not like shying away from Alonso because he's right-handed or anything like that. Francisco Alvarez has been hitting very well. Power hitting catcher at 2,900. I only have 2%, but if you're going to the Mets, obviously you could look there for value. But mostly I would just be playing the Mets that you usually want to play if you do go that route. Atlanta taking on Cleveland in Cleveland, another game where both teams have right around a 4.5 team total. For the Guardians, we have Joey Cantillo. For the Braves, we have Hurston Waldrop. Waldrop coming in at 7,200, getting 3% ownership. I have 3% of him. Cantillo getting 5% ownership. I have 1% of him, but if that climbed a little bit, that would be fine. Cantillo does have solid strikeout stuff. As a starter this year, 33 innings pitched, 27% strikeout percentage, but well below average stuff plus grade. But he's somebody that's always had a below average stuff plus grade. It was 92 last year. It's like 88 this year. Command has been better this year than in the past. So I've mentioned it before, but you do always want to compare stuff plus grades past years to current, because there are some inherent biases in it. So you have seen a drop off in stuff plus for Cantillo this year compared to last year, but he's always been somebody that the model just doesn't really like. So it's not, you don't want to just look at it and say like, wow, his stuff is horrible, he's going to stop getting strikeouts. He's shown the ability to get strikeouts in the past. He's gotten strikeouts this year, and he's never graded out well in the stuff plus model. But at 8K here, not somebody that I'm prioritizing. Waldrop, again, not somebody I'm prioritizing either. So far for Waldrop this season, most of the time has been spent at AAA. 19 starts, 91 2/3 innings pitched at AAA for the Braves, 22.5% strikeout percentage there. He projects to be around a 20% guy in the majors for the rest of the season. Cleveland, we know, does play up power. There are some strikeouts in that lineup. There are also a few hitters that are very difficult to strike out, namely Steven Kwan and Jose Ramirez. Manzardo has been hitting pretty well of late. You do have Carlos Santana back in the lineup, but at 7,200, if you need somebody in that price range, fine. I have 3%, but I don't think you're prioritizing either of these pitchers. I am getting to Braves against Cantillo. You do have Ronald Acuna back for the Braves. He is batting third, so that strengthens their lineup as well. 6% ownership coming into Ozzy Albies and 6% ownership coming into Sean Murphy are the two highest owned guys on the Braves. They both offer value. $3,500 price tag on Albies, $3,400 on Murphy. They both have some power from the right side. Cantillo has been solid so far this year at limiting everything to righties. 28% strikeout percentage against righties, 145 expected ISO, 310 expected WOBA. If you go back to last year, 28% strikeout percentage, 137 expected ISO. He's thrown his changeup 35% of the time to right-handed hitters. He has a 25% swinging strike percentage on the pitch. And this year it's up to 27%. So he has a very, very good changeup that he uses to neutralize right-handed hitters, and it has been successful. But you still have cheap upside here on the Braves. I'm getting to 12% Albies. I'm getting to 5% Murphy. I'm getting to 8% Acuna. Profar leading off at 4K. Harris in 7% of my lineups, along with Olsen, who does hit left-handed pitching very well. Now, Cantillo, even though he is very good against righties, he hasn't been one of these pitchers that necessarily can't get out same-handed hitters just because he has a really good changeup. Since last year, he has given up more power to lefties than righties, 190 expected ISO against lefties, but he still has a 27% strikeout percentage against left-handed hitters. But I do think Matt Olson is interesting just because he does hit left-handed pitching really well. You have seen Cantillo give up a little bit more power to lefties, or not even a little bit, more power to lefties. So I do think that's interesting for Matt Olson, whether you're stacking or just want a low-owned, high-upside one-off. For Cleveland bats against Waldrop, 6% ownership coming into Jose Ramirez is the high mark. He's my highest owned guy on the Guardians as well in 5% of my lineups. I'm getting to 3% Manzardo, and it goes down from there. I'm just not really getting to much Waldrop, but I'm also not getting to much of the Guardians. In our projections, you can see that Manzardo and Ramirez have the highest home run projections, relatively low stolen base projections. Kwan coming in at 0.12, very high 0.32 on Ramirez, but other than him, 0.12 on Kwan, 0.1 on Schneemann, who is batting second, 0.11 on Rocchio, but he's down near the bottom of the order. It's just a spot where I think on a smaller slate, given the pricing, maybe I'd have more interest in both sides, but on this slate, there's just other stuff that I like a little bit more overall, but clearly not going to blame anyone if you want to get to Ramirez or if you want to get to Manzardo. But there's just other spots I am prioritizing more personally, and that the field is going to prioritize more. Boston hosting the Marlins, about a 5 total for the Red Sox, around 4 for the Marlins. Giolito going for the Red Sox at 8,500. Alcantara going for the Marlins at 6,500. I'm not getting to too much of either of these guys. They each are projected for about 10% ownership right now. Alcantara is cheap. Maybe he starts to get things together sooner than later. You have kind of seen his run prevention at least tick up a bit recently, but overall a 4.5 xFIP, 6.55 ERA. He has been unlucky as far as run prevention goes. His stuff plus grade is actually well above average. 107.4 is very good, but it hasn't resulted in strikeouts this year. Only a 16.8% strikeout percentage, and you are getting a significant park downgrade for him facing the Red Sox in Fenway. Red Sox have been good basically since trading Rafael Devers. Don't really know how that worked, but it has. 194 expected ISO allowed to lefties for Alcantara this year, 178 to righties. If you want to use him as a value play, fine. I personally only have about 3% in the lineups that I built before the show. Giolito getting 10% ownership at 8,500. I only have 2%. Talked about it with the Marlins yesterday with Bybee. Bybee ended up having, a decent start. He got the win. He scored, I think, 17 DraftKings points. But Miami's not as bad an offense as I think people give them credit for. For one, they are a pretty difficult offense to strike out. Active roster ranks 22nd in strikeout percentage. And in terms of production, they're not great, but they rank 12th in WRC+. That sandwiches them between the Athletics and the Padres. It actually puts them slightly ahead of Boston against right-handed pitching. Giolito is not what he used to be. He can still put together some decent starts, but overall this year, only a 20% strikeout percentage in 100 innings pitched. He's okay at 8,500, but I don't really see him as a priority. The field's getting to 10%, which, is fine, but it is a nice park upgrade here for Miami as well. I just don't think I'm going to end up getting to too much Giolito. It seems like, right now with a 15% ownership projection on Manaea and 10% on Giolito, I just prefer getting more Manaea if that's how things are going to shake out. For the bats here, starting on the Miami side, I am getting to them a little bit here, kind of similar to the Mets, where there's not much ownership coming into Miami, and I'm north of that, but they're not going to make or break my night. Or at least I should say, if they do poorly, they're not going to break my night. If I win a tournament with Miami, obviously they make my night. But 10% Augustin Ramirez is the high mark for me, projected for about 5% ownership. Wagman, I didn't have an ownership projection for him when I ran stuff, but he's in 7% of my lineups. He's batting 7th at 2,600. I have 5% Edwards, 5% Lopez, 4% Stowers. And just kind of go down from there. But there is stolen base upside here. There is power upside here. It's certainly not the sexiest lineup to get to, but I do like the park. I like the pricing in general. I like the combination of power and stolen base upside. Lopez has some of both at shortstop. Stowers has a bunch of power. Edwards doesn't have any power, but he'll steal bases. Ramirez has a lot of power, and he can run a little bit. Marcy has shown power. He's batting 6th. Giolito so far this season against lefties, allowing a 244 expected ISO. Righties have a 206 expected ISO. Fenway Park does play up right-handed power specifically, which again just looks good for a $3,900 Augustin Ramirez. I like that a lot. I like Otto Lopez, expected ISO north of 200 against right-handed pitching this year, now in Fenway. Giolito historically has not been good at holding runners. I don't remember if that has changed, so I am looking right now. I know he was horrible at it when he was with the White Sox. So far this season, Giolito has allowed 9 stolen bases in 100 innings pitched. So he's graded out as slightly below average this year. He was average each of the last 2 years. He was slightly below average the year before that. The 2 years before that, he was actually slightly above average. The year before that, he was god-awful. And prior to that, he had been average. So I think it's fair to call him like average to slightly below average. Certainly not somebody that I would expect like Xavier Edwards or Otto Lopez or these guys to like not be running against. So I do think that there is some upside relative to salary here for Miami. On the Boston side against Alcantara, not getting quite as much as I expected, but I am above the field. So again, it probably is just a function of it's a 12-game slate. I keep thinking I'm going to like click on a team and have, 20% of everybody, and it ends up being like 5 to 10%. But on a 12-gamer, that does make sense. Good point from Jake as well. He said good positionality at the top for Miami. Anytime that you can get a relatively cheap catcher with power hitting in the middle of the order, a relatively, not that Edwards is cheap at 4,400, but he's not breaking the bank at second base, Lopez at shortstop. You don't have a bunch of outfielders at the top. Obviously, Stowers is an outfielder. Marcy batting sixth is an outfielder. But anytime you can get relatively inexpensive guys that have either power or stolen base upside that also are not playing the outfield or playing first base, that is pretty nice as well. So, yeah, that is a good point. Also, on the Boston side here against Alcantara, I'm getting to 11% Bregman. I'm getting to 11% Duran. The highest owned guys here are Duran at 4%, Story at 4%, Bregman at 3%, along with Abreu. So you really don't have much ownership coming into Boston, despite a park downgrade here for Alcantara. As I mentioned before, his stuff has been good this year. I don't think it's like an amazing spot for the Red Sox, but I do think you're getting a pitcher that hasn't been able to strike guys out, that is getting a big park downgrade here, that has allowed a 194 expected ISO to lefties and a 178 expected ISO to righties. I think there's substantial upside. Bregman and Duran, like I said, in 11% of my lineups, Story in 8, Abreu in 6, Toro and Anthony in 5. So another team that kind of just looks like similar to the Mets for me, where I'm north of the field because the field's at like 1 to 5%, and I'm at 5 to 10% on most of the main pieces. Looks like I just lost my camera, which probably nobody cares about, but I'll try and fix it for a second. Okay, that was weird. I guess it's back. That was easy. Josh said Red Sox at home, always chalky. I mean, it's a 12-game slate. They can't be that popular. I have them, like I said, everybody projected less than 5%. Maybe it comes in a little bit higher, but they don't have like the highest total on the slate or anything. Their total's in line with like Houston, Kansas City, Detroit, the Yankees, the Rockies, the A's, the Angels. It's lower than the Dodgers. It's certainly a lot lower than the Diamondbacks. The combination of a 12-game slate and Coors Field just means that most teams can't be that popular, especially like the Red Sox aren't super cheap either. 5,200 for Bregman, 5K for Duran. Most of the rest of the team between 4 and 5K, they're not mispriced. So I wouldn't expect them to be particularly popular here. Baltimore taking on the Astros in Houston. Camera gone again. Camera's just dead now, I guess. So this is my computer camera, and it looks like shit. But again, I would assume that there are 0 people watching this to see me. So I will just roll with the shitty camera quality because that's probably a better use of time than me trying to fix it. Baltimore, Houston, Framber Valdez on the mound for the Astros. Brandon Young going for the Orioles. $5,600 price tag on Young. 3% ownership. I have 3%. Hasn't been particularly good for the Orioles this year. He's not somebody that is expected to be particularly good. 19.5% strikeout percentage in 44 innings pitched. 4.5 xFIP is considerably better than his 6.7 ERA, but not somebody that is a priority. If you do need a cheap pitcher, he's probably a little underpriced at 5,600. The guy that is a priority, though, Framber Valdez, 10,500. Right now, only projected for 26% ownership. I am getting to 63% Valdez against the Orioles. And Valdez is somebody that I usually don't get that much of. So it actually stands out a little bit more that he is showing up so much for me. He's not one of those guys that our model just really, really loves and always, projects really highly. But we do have him as the highest projected pitcher here on this slate. I think that makes a ton of sense. 20.7 fantasy point projection on him. And we don't really have it close. We have him just hands down higher than everybody else. The matchup here against the Orioles is nice. We have seen solid strikeout stuff from Valdez this year. He's a good ground ball pitcher, always has been. The strikeout stuff kind of comes and goes, but 24.5% strikeout percentage overall this year. Stuff plus grade at 108. Command has been good, 101.5 location plus grade. So everything there looks good. And then you get an Orioles team that is kind of similar to what I've talked about with the Nationals, where most of the Orioles' best hitters are left-handed. So you naturally get a benefit if you're a good left-handed pitcher facing the Orioles. We did not have an Orioles lineup when I ran everything. It doesn't look like we still do, but Tyler O'Neill's on the injured list. So that's one of your, actual good right-handed hitters that is injured. Mountcastle's back. He's been dog shit this year, but he is at least a right-handed hitter with a history of being good. But you look at, what is likely to be the lineup here. Jackson Holliday, left-handed. Jordan Westberg, right-handed and good. Gunnar Henderson, left-handed. Rutschman, right-handed and probably good. Mountcastle right-handed, and I have absolutely no idea. Jeremiah Jackson, good year in the minors so far this year, but up until this year, this is somebody that was released from the Angels AA team or traded, I don't remember, but wasn't producing. He was released by the Mets AA team and then appears to have improved with the Orioles. But, you compare that pedigree to Framber Valdez. I'll take Framber Valdez. Greg Allen, the Orioles just, veteran outfielder. He's like 32 years old. The Orioles just took him from the Cubs AAA team. I think he had an opt-out. Certainly not somebody that you're scared of if you're Valdez. Kobe Mayo, very good hitting prospect, but also very flawed and strikes out a lot. And then Dylan Carlson, I think, just snapped like an 0 for 35 at the plate. So it's not, it's not the most dangerous lineup anyway, because of the Orioles making trades at the deadline. They're probably calling up Dylan Beavers and Samuel Basallo tomorrow. That's the date that they can call them up without them losing rookie eligibility. So you just get this watered down lineup that combined, the trades combined with injuries, it's just not a very good lineup anyway. And two of the best hitters in it are left-handed and don't hit left-handed pitching well. So it just sets up as a really, really nice spot for Valdez. And then also, I mentioned the righties in there. It's not like Valdez can't get righties out. He has a 25% strikeout percentage against righties this year, only 21% against lefties, 132 expected ISO to righties, sub 100 to lefties. Lefties have done literally nothing against him all season. Righties have done a little bit more, but he's still been well above average at limiting production, and his strikeout percentage is higher. So it just sets up as an amazing spot for Valdez here against the Orioles. Obviously, it's baseball. Shit can happen any given night, but I love getting the Valdez here at 10,500. I think that there's enough cheap SP2s that you can get to, or mid-range SP2s that you can get to. I think on a 12-game slate, there's going to be enough inexpensive bats you can get to that Valdez just looks really, really good. Doug said, when do you think Basallo Beavers up? Tomorrow is my guess. At the very least, Beavers. Basallo, they've been making up excuses for not calling up both of them because they can't just come out and say, like, we want to maintain their rookie of the year eligibility. So they've just been saying, like, vaguely, oh, well, they still have things to work on. With Basallo, they do specifically want him to work defensively still. So maybe they keep him down a little bit longer just to get him some more games behind the plate. Beavers, I would be very surprised if he's not coming up tomorrow, because I think he is 100% just down right now while they wait for tomorrow to come. I don't know for sure if Basallo will be up tomorrow, but wouldn't be surprised at all if they're both up tomorrow. So Valdez, big priority here is the takeaway there. He is my highest owned pitcher on the slate, and I certainly hope that continues. For the bats here, on the Orioles side, I have 2% Westberg, 1% Gunnar, 1% Holiday. If you want to go to those guys at literally zero ownership, they're good, but there's just so many spots that I would rather get to. 4 of the Baltimore hitters are hitting 500 against Valdez. I couldn't care less. That doesn't matter. For the Astros against Young, getting to them a little bit, mostly in line with the field. Carlos Correa getting 6% ownership at 4K. Christian Walker getting 5%. I didn't have an Astros lineup when I ran everything. We do have one now. Altuve, Correa, Sanchez, Walker, Diaz, Ramon Urias, revenge game. Taylor Trammell, Mauricio Dubon, Cam Smith. Doesn't look like I had Urias in the projected lineup that I used. I had Jeremy Pena instead. So there is no Jeremy Pena today. It is Ramon Urias instead. But I'm getting to 5% Correa, 7% Walker, also revenge narrative for him. Much less recent than Urias, but he did also play for the Orioles, was drafted by the Orioles. 5% Yainer Diaz, 3% Altuve and Sanchez. If you wanted to get more, I do think it's a pretty nice spot. In addition to Brandon Young not being particularly good, the Orioles bullpen at this point is just a collection of guys that are trying out for next year's major league team. They traded most of their best bullpen pieces at the deadline. You have a bullpen now that consists of Keegan Aiken as your closer, along with Yennier Cano, who hasn't been particularly good this year anyway. Those guys are basically a committee at closer now. And those are guys that used to be like middle relievers. So your middle relievers now are your long guys like Rico Garcia, Yarmil Geraldo, Grant Wolfram, Corbin Martin, Cage Stroud. If you haven't heard of any of these guys, there's absolutely no reason that you should have. Dietrich Enns is like their setup guy now. This is somebody that was not even able to like stick in the Tigers bullpen period this year. And now he's a late guy for the Orioles. So you do get substantial add-on run upside here if you can get to Brandon Young early. There is no like relief stopper for the Orioles. The back of their bullpen's not good, and it just gets worse from there. So it's a high upside spot for the Astros. And then you also, you have this game in Houston where you have the Crawford boxes in left field. You have a right-handed heavy lineup for the Astros that could take advantage of that. So far this season, Young has allowed a 193 expected ISO to righties, 221 to lefties. Now, he has shown much better strikeout numbers against righties. 24% strikeout percentage against righties is legitimately good. 17% against lefties. Lefties have really done damage against him. 358 expected WOBA, 221 expected ISO, 17% strikeout percentage. It sets up well for like Jesus Sanchez at 4,200, but you have a predominantly right-handed lineup, even though they have struck out more and haven't had as much production overall with a 328 expected WOBA. They have still put up power numbers, 254 actual ISO, 193 expected in a limited sample so far. So I think the Astros do have a high ceiling here because of the bullpen, because of the fact Young's not particularly good either, but they're not a team that I'm prioritizing, at least at the moment. I'm pretty much in line with the field. White Sox taking on the Royals in Kansas City. White Sox have been an absolute pain in the ass lately as they have suddenly figured out how to hit for the last month after costing me money every single day this season that I played them and they couldn't hit. Today we have Noah Cameron going for Kansas City. We have Aaron Savali on the mound for the White Sox. $6,800 salary for Savali. $9,300 for Noah Cameron. No ownership coming into Savali. I don't have him either. Very, very bad park for strikeouts. Kansas City team that overall is difficult to strike out, and a pitcher in Savali that is not particularly good at getting strikeouts. 19.5% strikeout percentage for him so far this season. On the other side, 6% ownership coming into Cameron. If you have the salary for him and you just land on him, I think it's fine. Like, the White Sox are still not a good offense, but Cameron is without a doubt overpriced as well. He is somebody that is priced up as a result of his ERA, which is 2.52. He has a 4.1 xFIP. He also probably is priced up a little bit extra because of the matchup with the White Sox. He has a 20.4% strikeout percentage this year in 93 innings pitched. He doesn't project as a great strikeout guy. He hasn't been a great strikeout guy. He has been lucky in terms of run prevention. He is a average pitcher, probably. He is perfectly fine. If he were like 8K, I think he'd be a pretty good play here. At 9,300, I think it's just basically in lineups where you have $9,300 left and you need a low-owned pitcher that is capable of having a good game. Like, Noah Cameron fits that, but he's not somebody that I'd be actively looking to build around or anything like that. He's only in 1% of my lineups right now. Nicholas Barrett mentioned that it's hot in Kansas City. Wind blowing out a bit as well. And that is why you see the relatively high total here, like a 5-team total for Kansas City, a little north of 4 for the White Sox. Anytime you see a run total north of 4 for the White Sox, especially when they're not facing a terrible pitcher, it generally speaks to something being unusual. And here it has to do most likely with the weather. For the bats, speaking of getting to the White Sox, I'm getting to some of the White Sox. It is the ones that I don't mind getting to. The field is not likely to get to Kansas City or to the White Sox very much. 3 to 4% projected ownership to Lenyn Sosa, 3% to Vargas, 3% to Caro and Robert. I'm getting to 13% Miguel Vargas. He's $3,200 at first base. He gives you some power and stolen base upside. I've said it a lot this year when I'm trying to justify burning money on the White Sox, like I am about to right now. They are, and we did get their lineup. We didn't have it when I ran everything, so it is different than I had. But Vargas is leading off at 3,200. Robert's hitting third. Caro's hitting fifth. You do have Colson Montgomery batting cleanup. Despite the lefty-lefty matchup, I did not have him in the projected lineup I used, so maybe I'll end up getting some of him. We don't have Benintendi in. I was getting to him. But the three guys I'm getting to the most, Vargas 13%, Caro 11%, and Robert 11%. They are all in the lineup as expected. But I've said it a lot about the White Sox this year. From an individual talent standpoint, I think they have several guys that tend to be underpriced because as a collective team, they suck and they don't score a lot of runs. And because their teammates suck, they have less guys on base to drive in. They don't get as many plate appearances because they're not turning the lineup over because the bottom of the order is dog shit, et cetera, et cetera. But as a result, like if you just look at the individual players, Miguel Vargas, 3,200, comes into this game, it's going to be a smallish sample, but he hasn't done a lot of damage against left-handed pitching, 124 expected ISO. But overall this season, I'm pulling his numbers up now. I think against right-handed pitching, he has close to like a 200 expected ISO. Overall, Miguel Vargas, 95 WRC plus, 4 stolen bases, 170 ISO overall. He's not great, but he could hit a little bit. Like there is some upside there. Caro, hitting in the middle of the order as a cheap catcher option at low ownership, comes into this game 102 WRC plus, only a 105 ISO, only 4 home runs, no stolen bases, not a ton of home runs or steals there, but he's cheap. He's been average in terms of production. Luis Robert actually has power and stolen base upside if he feels like playing baseball, which he actually has over the last month or so. He's reasonably priced at 4,300 and low owned. So I am getting to those guys as value a bit. Maybe I end up getting some Colson Montgomery. I have 5% Curtis Mead batting second, 5% Sosa batting sixth as well. I don't have the bottom of the White Sox order, but they are a way that you can offset some salary and some ownership if you are playing lineups that are relatively popular. Maybe you're trying to get to Valdez and Coors Field. That's some guys you could do it with. Einsteinium said, how do you feel about this? Both teams are teams you usually get to. KC from last year, White Sox from this year. Yeah, I'm not getting to Kansas City too much, which I kind of thought I would be given the weather and the fact they are Kansas City. I'm getting to them a little bit, but kind of similar to the field, if not a little bit lower. Bobby Witt Jr. is getting 11% ownership. So is Salvador Perez. 4,100 for Perez. He is only catcher eligible. We've seen that positional eligibility fluctuate throughout the year. Catcher first base, then just catcher, then catcher first base. Right now, he is only catcher. So it makes it a little bit harder to get him into lineups, but generally you would prefer to play him at catcher anyway. Bobby Witt Jr. getting 11% ownership at 6K. Clearly, if you can find the salary for Witt, that's great. 8% ownership to Garcia and to Pasquantino, about 5% to India, Yastrzemski, Isbell, 4% to Frazier. My highest owned guy here is Witt at 7%. I have 5% Garcia, 4% Perez. It goes down from there. So I'm not getting to too much Kansas City. I think they're fine. Like the weather's good, like we said. The park is good for scoring runs. It's not good for hitting home runs, but it's good for scoring in general. Savali's allowed a 211 expected ISO to righties this year, 165 to lefties. Very interesting reverse splits for Savali. Not only is he allowing more power to righties as far as expected numbers go, so his actual ISO allowed to righties is 166. His expected ISO allowed to lefties is 165. And then his actual ISO allowed to lefties is 203. His expected ISO allowed to righties is 211. So from an expected standpoint, from an actual standpoint, he's allowed more power to lefties than righties. But from an expected standpoint, he's basically allowed the power to lefties that you would expect him to give up to righties and vice versa. But also his strikeout percentage against lefties is 8 points higher than against righties. So pretty interesting reverse splits there. Again, would point you toward Bobby Witt Jr., Salvador Perez, Michael Garcia in particular. So I'm not getting to them much right now. That could change by lock. I don't think there's like a reason that I'm not getting to them. I think it's a perfectly fine spot against Savali and the White Sox bullpen in good hitting weather in Kansas City. Detroit taking on Minnesota. In Minnesota, 4.5 total for the Twins, which makes them look like pretty much every other team. About a 5 to 5.5 total for the Tigers. Pearson Ole and Jose Urena expected to be pitching for the Twins. They each have like 2% ownership. I'm not getting to either of them. They are both 5K. That's why they have very small amounts of ownership, but don't need either of those guys, I don't think. Charlie Morton getting 11% ownership at 8,200. I'm getting to about 5%. I wouldn't mind getting a little bit more. I think he's a pretty solid pitcher overall. Obviously, he had the horrible start to the season, but that start was weird in that it wasn't backed up by underlying stuff. Like it's not like his stuff has been terrible this year. He said as much himself when he was pitching, when he was struggling through the first month or so of the season. He pretty much said, like, look, if I thought my stuff sucked, I would just retire, but it doesn't. I don't, my command needs to get better. He figured out his curveball. He has a 100 stuff plus grade overall this year. That's actually better than last year. 4.24 xFIP is about a run and a half better than his 5.76 ERA. 23% strikeout percentage. He's still a solid pitcher. I don't have any issues with getting to him here. I'm about half the field personally, but again, that probably has a lot to do with like how much Sean Manaea I have. If you have less Sean Manaea than me, obviously you have more lineups where you have exposure in that 8K range available, and you probably would want to get to more Morton. He looks perfectly fine here against a not terrible, but not great Twins lineup. You know, you have Larnach in there, you have Buxton, you have Keyshaw, you have Wallner, you have Lee, you have Lewis. There are guys that have talent in this Twins lineup, despite them selling aggressively at the deadline. But, you know, Morton overall, I think, is still a pretty good pitcher, and I think that ownership number makes sense on him. For the bats, not much ownership coming into the Tigers, and I don't have much either. $3,800 Colt Keith getting 5% ownership is the high mark. Everybody else is like 3% or less. It's not a bad matchup, but it's also the bullpen game thing that just becomes relatively unappealing. I think if you get to any of the good Tigers, it's fine. But the problem is just like on a 12-game slate, you can say that about so many players. Like, would I care? Would I be upset if I got to Riley Green or Spencer Torkelson or Torres? Like, no, of course not. But there's no shortage of $5,000 players on a 12-game slate that I can say, yeah, I'd like to have some of that guy. So if you mix those guys in a little bit, fine. But I don't think anything from the Tigers really looks like a priority here. You do also get pinch hit risk with guys like Keith. Nick said that he thought Detroit would be somewhat popular. Yeah, I was a little surprised that their ownership isn't higher, but at the same time, I think it's just that like Torres is 5K, Torkelson's 4,900, Green is 5,500, Carpenter's up to 5,200. It's not that any of those salaries individually are necessarily a problem. Like, those guys all have big time power. They've all earned expensive salaries. But when you put them all together, you have one of the more expensive stacks on the slate, on a slate where you have a game in Coors, where you have a lot of inexpensive offenses with 4.5 to 5 run totals, where you have Valdez that you probably want to pay up for, where you have DeGrom. I think that it's really probably just a pricing thing on Detroit mostly. On the other side, for Minnesota, against Morton, I am getting to them more than the field, which is probably mostly a value thing. Like I said, I think Morton is a solid pitcher. He's not unhittable or anything like that. Byron Buxton only projected for 4% ownership. The high mark here is Cody Clemens at about 6%, 3,500 first base and outfield eligible. We did not have a Twins lineup when I ran stuff. We do now. There is no Ryan Jeffers in the Twins lineup. I had 10% of him, so that'll go away. You have Gasper in there instead, so that's a pretty big drop off with Gasper hitting 9th. I did not have. Oh, I didn't have Gasper in the projected lineup. So I think that's the only difference. No Jeffers, and you have Gasper. So that is a drop off. But I was getting to 15% Byron Buxton at 4% owned. $5,300 outfielder, dime a dozen on a slate like this, but obviously gives you power, gives you stolen base upside. Morton generally not very good at holding runners, if I remember correctly. I think he's somebody that kind of has been up and down throughout his career. So far this season, and this goes back obviously to his time with the Orioles, where Adley Rutschman is not exactly great at throwing them out either. 9 stolen bases allowed this year, 12 last year, 16 the year before. So he's actually graded out as slightly above average to slightly above average each of the last 4 seasons. I still think you probably see Buxton try and run potentially. Maybe not, since he just came back from the injured list. I don't know. But either way, there is a lot of power upside for Buxton. So far this season, Morton has allowed a 151 expected ISO to righties, 173 to lefties. So not a ton of power to either side. 21.5% strikeout percentage to righties, 24.5% to lefties. But Byron Buxton, obviously just very good, very high upside. Cody Clemens, I have 13%. I have 11% Wallner, 9% Keyshaw, who again gives you some stolen base upside in addition to some power upside. Like I said, I had 10% Jeffers. Obviously won't have that, but I'm a bit over the field right now on Minnesota. Outside of Buxton, they're just a value stack. They're one of many teams on the slate with a 4.5 total. There's not much ownership here. They are cheap other than Buxton, so I am getting to them around 2x the field for the most part. Josh said, is the wind blowing out? And I assume you mean Sacramento. I do not know off the top of my head. I know it's factored into our projections. I don't remember off the top of my head, which I think, yeah. So I think it blows out there at night and it blows out in Tampa during the day is I think what it is typically. Roden scratched and Donovan scratched. Cool. Getting ready for basketball season. Roden shouldn't matter. Was just getting to the cards now. Starting on the New York, starting with the pitching. Luis Gil going for the Yankees. Andre Payante for the Cardinals. I don't really have interest in Payante. Good ground ball pitcher, not a good strikeout pitcher. 12-game slate. Don't really need it at 7,300. Obviously not a great matchup against the Yankees either. Gil looks fine here at 7,500. He's getting 12% ownership. I have 9%. The matchup against the Cardinals is kind of middle of the road. They rank 18th in WRC plus against right-handed pitching, but they also rank 25th in strikeout percentage. Scratching Brendan Donovan does probably weaken the lineup. He's one of their better hitters. Obviously, I'm not sure who they replaced him with, but whoever it is isn't going to be as good as Brendan Donovan, I wouldn't think. You already had Gorman in the lineup, so we'll see who it is. I assume it's going to be Sagesi or whatever. But yeah, so that makes the matchup a little bit better for Gil not having Donovan to deal with. But overall, Gil is a volatile pitcher. Like, still don't really know what to make of him. Obviously, he's missed most of this season with an injury. But you go back to last season, you had him at times look very, very good, and then at other times look not very good. Overall, in 29 innings pitched last year, he struck out 27% of hitters. He projects as like a 26% guy going forward, and he is pretty cheap here. He's made 2 starts so far. He's thrown 8 2/3 innings. In his most recent start, he went 5 1/3. He faced 22 batters, so that's good to see. That's a pretty normal number of batters faced. We haven't projected for 22 to 23 batters here, so I don't think we should be too concerned about his workload or anything like that. Probably not going to go throw a 9-inning, 115-pitch complete game, but I don't think you should expect any like massive limitations or anything. So he looks like just a solid mid-range option, I think. About a 5 total here for the Yankees against Payante, and I am getting to them. There are a couple things working against them that I don't love. One is that they are outside of Yankee Stadium. Obviously, you like them in Yankee Stadium. Busch Stadium in St. Louis can be pretty weather dependent, I think, as far as whether or not you want hitters there. It appears to be hot as shit there today. Wind, I think, is neutral, but it's in the mid-90s. St. Louis is generally very humid as well. I've said it before, but it's very similar weather-wise to the Mid-Atlantic. For anybody familiar with like Baltimore, DC, Virginia, it gets hot and humid in the summer, and then it's cooler in the beginning and end of the season. And so the ball doesn't carry as much beginning and end of the season, but it will carry more this time of year. So the weather does look nice here for hitting. Would still prefer they be in Yankee Stadium, but is what it is. Also, as I mentioned, Payante is good at keeping the ball on the ground, but he doesn't miss a lot of bats. And you do have a lot of hitters here that have significant power when they hit the ball. 182 expected ISO allowed to lefties this year for Payante, only 127 to righties. I'll take my chances, with Giancarlo Stanton, Aaron Judge being able to do damage when they hit the ball. But you also just have left-handed bats here that look, pretty good as well. I'm getting to Jazz Chisholm the most. He's getting 4% ownership. I have 15%. The highest owned guy here is Judge at 6%. I have 7% of him, but I'm getting to 15% Jazz at 4% owned. I'm getting to 11% Stanton and Rice, 10% Goldie and McMahon. They're all 5% or less. I have 7% Volpe at 4%, 5% Bellinger at 2%, 5% Grisham at 4%. So I'm just over pretty much on most of the Yankees. Obviously, I wish I was getting more Judge, but he is far and away the most expensive of the group at 6,300. So I am getting to the Yankees here. I do like them at low ownership. 5-run total is relatively high for this slate. It's pretty similar to a lot of other teams, but they're also just not that expensive as a stack. Judge himself is expensive, but everybody else is 4,800, or sorry, Bellinger's 5,300. Everybody else is 4,800 or less on the Yankees. For St. Louis, 3% Donovan was the highest owned guy for both me and the field. Obviously, that changes now, but they're not a priority for the field. They're not a priority for me. Gil is, I think, a solid enough pitcher. There's just other places I would rather go to. Alec Burleson, 4,100. Lars Nootbaar, 3,900. Probably the guys that I would start with if I were insisting on going with the Cardinals. Since last year, 171 expected ISO to lefties, 130 to righties for heel, 7 points higher in strikeout percentage against righties. Like, you're going to prefer left-handed bats against him if you're targeting against him, but I just probably won't be targeting against him. Arizona taking on the Rockies in Coors Field. For the Rockies, it's Tanner Gordon. For the Diamondbacks, it is Brandon Pfaadt. Pfaadt has not been great this year, but it is the Rockies. They can make anybody look great. Pfaadt is only 7K. Tanner Gordon is 4,500. He's getting 1% ownership. I have 2%. I mean, he's cheaper than like half of the hitters on the slate, but obviously he's not somebody that you want much, if any of. Brandon Pfaadt projected for 3% ownership. I have 9% right now. As long as the ownership stays relatively low on him, I don't mind getting to him because the Rockies are so bad. Like, obviously, I don't have a ton of confidence in his ability to pitch, period, but certainly in his ability to pitch in Coors Field. He comes into this start with a 19% strikeout percentage. That's down from 24% last year. His stuff plus grade is 97, which is down almost 6 points from last year. His location plus grade is 102.5, which is solid, but it's still down 5 points from last year. So yeah, I kind of used him as an example yesterday when I was talking about Bybee, where Bybee has seen a drop off in strikeout percentage, but everything else is held from last season. And he's probably still like a solid pitcher that just is seeing a drop off in strikeouts. For Pfaadt, everything across the board is down. He is just objectively a worse pitcher than last year, but he has been unlucky in terms of run prevention, 5.03 ERA compared to a 4.09 xFIP, and he's facing the Rockies, and these guys are absolutely awful. So Brandon Pfaadt, not looking really like a major league pitcher maybe this year, still probably a pretty good AAA pitcher, and this is basically like he's pitching in the PCL. He's facing a bunch of minor leaguers in a shitty ballpark to pitch in. So I would play some unowned 7K Brandon Pfaadt if he were pitching in the PCL, and that's pretty much what you're getting. So I don't mind using him as a contrarian value, mid-range option here. Obviously, very volatile still. For the Arizona bats, right now I'm not getting to him much, and obviously that's horrifying. I ended up getting to him a lot yesterday. It wasn't until my final late swap that I got above the field on the Diamondbacks. Still didn't matter. But I'm not getting to him much here. Scares the shit out of me. But at the same time, like, I actually have them projected to be a little bit lower owned than the industry aggregate. And I still just have so much ownership coming in here on a 12-game slate. 26% coming into Carroll, 30% coming into Marte, 14 to Gurriel, 24 to McCarthy, batting fifth at 3,700, 12 to Thomas, 20 to Perdomo, 20 to Locklear, 16 to Alexander. They're good plays individually. Like, I understand why the ownership is there. I'm sure you can make lineups that project to be plus EV with Diamondback stacks or Diamondbacks hitters. For me personally, my approach, at least right now, and certainly could change between now and lock, but my approach when I ran everything before the show is I think I make more money by, long-term by just hoping one of these, 23 other offenses beats the 20 to 30% owned Diamondbacks. Obviously, that's simplifying it a little bit because I'm not over the field on 23 other offenses, but I think that by playing 10%, give or take, of a lot of different offenses that have like 4.5 to 5.5 totals, I'm going to put myself that are all, like 5% owned across the board. I'm going to put myself in a better position than trying to play a bunch of stacks where everybody is 15 to 30% owned. That isn't a correct answer. Like, obviously, I think the Diamondbacks are in a great spot. They're in the best spot on the slate. If they were not getting this ownership, they would be the most obvious, just jam these guys in the world. I'm sure some good players will have the Diamondbacks tonight. I'm sure some won't. For me personally, right now, I have 7% Carroll. That's my highest owned guy. I have 5% Marte. I just don't have the Diamondbacks. Again, I don't think there's a right or a wrong answer. One thing I will say with the salaries, you have a really good value bat in Jake McCarthy at 3,700, batting fifth. As a result, he's going to be 24% owned. Alec Thomas, 3,800, good value. They are both outfielders, though, so they do come with opportunity cost because that's where a lot of your best overall hitters are going to be. You do also get some pinch hit risk here. We have McCarthy with a 13% chance of being pinch hit for, Thomas at 14%. It's not massive. They are, I think, both solid defenders. They're relatively likely to stay in the game, but it's not nothing. But then these guys at the top, the ones that like you really want, Perdomo, Gurriel, Marte, Carroll, once you start stacking those guys together, you are limiting, what you can do as far as pitching goes. You are limiting what you can do as far as your secondary stack goes. Like, they are expensive. You probably not only need the Diamondbacks to like have a good game, obviously, you probably need them to one, score like more runs than anybody, but also do it via home run. Yesterday's a really good example. It was a 5-game slate. The Diamondbacks scored like 8 runs. You had a really big game from Gurriel. You had some solid games from other Diamondbacks guys. And I don't think the winning lineup in the $18, $15, whatever it was, had the Diamondbacks. I think it was like Guardians and Mets maybe or something. Maybe it had like Gurriel, but I'm almost positive that at the very least, the primary stack was Cleveland. You had a very low scoring slate, like 154, I think, won yesterday, even though the most popular team scored 8 runs. Like, when the stack is as expensive overall as the Diamondbacks, you kind of either need, like, you go with the cheaper version. You get like McCarthy, Thomas, Locklear, Alexander, and those guys all do well. Like, if that happens, you're gonna have a really high scoring slate. But other than that, like, if the runs are distributed in the way that like you expect, where it's Carroll, Marte, Gurriel doing a lot of the damage, you're going to need some inexpensive pitching to really go off. You're going to need to avoid like any of these inexpensive stacks putting up similar production probably. So I do think DraftKings did a good job on the pricing here. And that's probably one reason why at their ownership, I'm just not getting to that much. On the other side for the Rockies, thank God I'm not getting much of them either. 10% ownership coming into Moniak, 11% coming in to Goodman, 8% to Karros, 7% give or take to Beck, to Bernabel, to Freeman, 5% to Doyle. I'm mostly around the field on these guys. I have 11% Moniak. He's been excellent this year. He's actually playing like a first-round pick, or number 1 overall pick, rather, like he was however many years ago. As I mentioned before, Fod has not been a good pitcher this year. He has allowed a 240 expected ISO to lefties with a 17% strikeout percentage. He's allowed a 231 expected ISO to righties with a 21% strikeout percentage. Mickey Moniak so far this season against right-handed pitching, 243 expected ISO. Tovar has a 215 expected ISO, but he is not in the lineup. Yeah, he's not in the lineup, so that doesn't matter. That's a bump for Fod. Hunter Goodman is actually good. And he is a catcher. He's one of your higher upside catchers. 198 expected ISO. Jordan Beck has a 164 expected ISO. But overall, it's obviously not a very good lineup. They are relatively inexpensive. The only hitter at 5K is Hunter Goodman. But I have 10% Freeman, Goodman, Moniak, 7% Beck, 5% Karros, Bernabel, Ritter, mostly in line with the field here against Fod. I was a little scared that I was going to click over there and see that I was playing them at a huge rate. So glad to see that I'm not. Angels taking on the A's in Sacramento. For the A's, we have Jack Perkins at $5,900. For the Angels, we have Yusei Kikuchi at $8,800. This is a spot that I am getting a lot of both sides, it appears. Starting with the pitching, $8,800 Kikuchi getting 10% ownership. I have 16%. The A's strike out. They also have a lot of power. It's not a favorable park to pitch in. You have a high total here, et cetera, et cetera. But Kikuchi's not getting a ton of ownership. He's reasonably priced at $8,800. He is a pretty good strikeout pitcher, 24% K percentage this year. I'm not going crazy with him, but I am getting to him around 16%. Jack Perkins is getting 20% ownership at $5,900. I have 39%. He's cheap. He's facing a strikeout heavy Angels team. He made 9 starts at AAA this year, 44 innings pitched, struck out 38.5% of hitters. He projects for like a 24% strikeout percentage going forward. He is more talented than a $5,900 price tag on a slate where there's plenty of guys that I want to pay for. So I am getting over the field on Perkins, who is making his, I believe, third major league start. Third major league start, 11th major league appearance. Overall this year, he has struck out 24% of hitters. You expect that to go down as a starter, but still as a starter, he projects, like as a 22 to 24% K guy. And then the Angels obviously strike out a lot. So I am using him as a value play, even though I do think he's very volatile. The park is good for hitting home runs. The Angels have a lot of power. They just also strike out a lot. And like I said, I am playing both sides of this one. The Angels are my highest owned stack as well. They are getting some ownership, 12% coming in to Mike Trout and Zach Neto, 15% coming in to Luis Rengifo. We did not have their lineup when I ran stuff. We still do not, as far as I know. 11% ownership to Nolan Schanuel, like 6 to 10% or 5 to 10% to Adele, to Ohapi, to Ward, to Moncada. So they are getting ownership. I have 20% Neto. That's the high mark for me. I have 9% Rengifo, 10 to 15 on Adele, Ohapi, Ward, Trout, 7 Schanuel, 5 Moncada. So I'm either around the field or higher on most of the Angels here. And they're, to me, like the perfect team. This is a kind of like the prototypical spot if you're playing multiple lineups to be overweight to both sides because pricing is reasonable. There are a couple of expensive Angels. Neto is 5,300, 4,800 Trout, 4,700 Ward, but Adele has lived up to his prospect status from a couple years ago this season. The strikeouts, still striking out 26% against right-handed pitching, but has a 284 expected ISO at 3,900. Moncada has a 235 expected ISO at 4,300. Ward has a 223 expected ISO. Trout is at 270. Neto is at 217 and has stolen base upside. Rengifo doesn't have a lot of power, but he's cheap with multi-position eligibility. Ohapi strikes out a third of the time, but also has a nearly 200 expected ISO at catcher. There is so much strikeout and home run upside, or strikeout downside / home run upside, I guess, on the Angels, strikeout upside for Perkins. And then for Perkins, you have this pitcher that probably has pretty good strikeout stuff, but is also unproven in a hitter-friendly park. Like, there's just so much ceiling versus salary in this game or in this matchup on both sides for the Angels and for Perkins. I'm happy to, I have 40% Perkins right now, close to it, and 25% of my lineups right now have at least 2 Angels. So 65% right now of my lineups combined have either 2 Angels or Perkins. With the pricing, the park, the way that the Angels score their runs, and the rate that they strike out, I think that makes a lot of sense. And the ownership's not, too crazy. There is ownership to both sides, but it's not out of control, all things considered. On the A's side, against Kikuchi, 9% Brent Rooker for me, 9% Daryl Hernandez, 6%, 5 to 6%, Langoliers, Colby Thomas, Luis Urias. The field is getting around 3 to 5% on most of the A's. So I'm pretty similar there. Rooker, I'm about 2x the field at 5,200 so far this season. Kikuchi is a little bit of a boomer bust guy as well. 199 expected ISO to right-handed hitters, 23% strikeout percentage for Kikuchi since the start of last season. Shea Langoliers, 190 expected ISO against lefties. Brent Rooker, 301. Obviously really stands out. I'm happy that that's the guy I'm getting the most of. Most of this lineup has not been very good, albeit in a limited sample. Nick Kurtz, lefty, 124 expected ISO. Hernandez, sub 100, not a lot of at-bats, but he's a defense-first guy. Urias, not a lot of at-bats, but a 137 expected ISO. So I think it sets up, if I have to, I would rather have more Kikuchi, I think, than the Angel or than the A's. But Rooker in particular, I think, looks very, very good. And then Hernandez at shortstop, if he's batting 6th at 3,200, just using him a little bit for value is okay, I think. 2 more games to get to. San Diego taking on the Dodgers in Dodger Stadium. 5.5 total for the Dodgers. 4 to 4.5 for the Padres. This is the best home run park in baseball. So that is something to keep in mind. We have a screw up in our data provider because Michael King was just placed on the injured list. So I'm going to refresh our projections and see if that has changed. I was going to say, unless I completely misread that blurb. So that needs to be changed. Our data provider does tend to have issues with that. So it's not Michael King. It is, I think, Randy Vasquez. Yeah, Randy Vasquez is expected to go for the Dodgers. So that makes the Dodgers look a lot better than they would if it was King. We have Kershaw going for the Dodgers. No ownership coming into Vasquez. I don't have any at 6,500. 3% coming into Kershaw. I don't have him either at 7,700. Tough strikeout matchup. Obviously not a great pitcher at this point in his career either. For the Padres bats, 15% Manny Machado stands out to me. I'm getting a lot of him. He's only projected for 5% ownership so far this season. Kershaw has held righties to a 147 expected ISO. He's also only struck them out 16% of the time. I'm more than happy to take my chances on a low-owned Manny Machado against left-handed pitching this year. 149 plate appearances, 270 expected ISO, 248 since last year. I have 9% Tatis at 4% owned, 6% Bogarts at 2%, 5% Laureano at 2%. So you can basically look at like the top of this Padres lineup, and it's similar to a lot of the other teams for me where I don't have tons of them, but I have more than the field. And I think it's a really high upside spot in this stadium against a pitcher that just doesn't have the same margin for error that he used to in Kershaw. Now, on the other side here, I'm not getting to much of the Dodgers, but that is also using our projections, which have Michael King in. So we do need to fix that. Projections on the Dodgers are obviously going to go up once you flip that to Randy Vasquez. So we have 17% projected ownership to Ohtani, and then around 5% of most of the other Dodgers. I was getting to barely any. I think I'll probably end up around the field there once we get to Vasquez, because it is a really good spot against Randy Vasquez, particularly for left-handed bats. He does not have the ability to get lefties out. 11% strikeout percentage, 271 expected ISO against lefties, only a 13% strikeout percentage, and 207 expected ISO against righties. So I'm not saying to shy away from the righties, but I am saying if you can afford Ohtani, Freeman, Muncy, Conforto, those guys are going to look really good. And then finally, going to San Francisco, where Tampa Bay is taking on the Giants. Joe Boyle is pitching for Tampa Bay. Landon Rupp going for the Giants. Rupp, 7,600. Don't really have interest in him. Joe Boyle, 5,400 is a mispricing. He should not be $5,400, especially in San Francisco, but really anywhere. But I also think he gets steamed a little bit. I have him projected for 33% ownership. I'm only getting the 7% Boyle. So this is also part of the reason that I have so much Perkins. I think, Perkins gives you legitimate strikeout upside at 5,900. Boyle gives you legitimate strikeout upside at 5,400. I think you're going to get like 1.5 to 2x the ownership coming into Boyle that you are Perkins, and I think the range of outcomes is similar. So that's one reason why, yes, 20% ownership to Perkins is relatively high, but it's still lower than Boyle. So I have a combined like 50% Boyle and Perkins. The field, I think, is going to have around a combined 50 to 55 Boyle and Perkins. I've just kind of flipped it where I'm playing more Perkins, they're playing more Boyle. Boyle is clearly a good point per dollar play here. He's the other thing that you're going to want to keep in mind is from a combination standpoint, you're probably going to have a very high percentage of Boyle plus Diamondbacks. So it's not only that the Diamondbacks are going to be popular and Boyle's going to be popular, they're probably going to be combined a ton because he is a very obvious way, along with Perkins, to afford those good Diamondbacks without having to play a really bad pitcher or anything like that. So I think Boyle is kind of sort of like the pitching equivalent to the Diamondbacks for me, where I very obviously agree he's a good play. He's the best value pitcher on the slate at 5,400, I think. We have him. We have him right behind Perkins in points per dollar. One of those two is clearly the best, and the other one is the second best. But I'm just kind of shying away from the ownership. I'm going to some cheaper bats. I'm getting to more Valdez at pitcher. So, I'm not telling anyone not to play Boyle. Just make sure your lineups make sense. But he is obviously good. So far this season as a starter, Boyle is striking out 26.7% of hitters in 16 innings pitched, 110 stuff plus grade. Unbelievably, shockingly bad, 78.8 location plus grade. I didn't know it could get that low. Last year, it was 83.9, and it's been worse through his first 16 innings this year. So you are playing that game with him. Like, can he work ahead in counts? Can he not throw 100 pitches per at bat? But at 5,400, like, that just takes away all of the risk. He's obviously very good, but the ownership and the fact that you can run into an issue where your teams look very similar if you're going to him is a concern. You just have to find a way to work through it. For the bats, I'm not getting to Tampa. Nobody's getting to Tampa. They're in one of the least favorable parks to hit in. Landon Rupp so far this season, 170 expected ISO to lefties, 133 to righties. He has struck lefties out about 6% less than righties. So if you're going to the Rays, I think it's Brandon Lau for left-handed power. Josh Lowe has some left-handed power. Chandler Simpson obviously has stolen base upside, but I'm just not getting to them. And then on the Giants side, I'm not getting much of them either. They're not getting any ownership, 2% or less to everybody. I have 4% Drew Gilbert, Willy Adames, 3% Ramos, 3% Devers. But Boyle's not the kind of guy that I really like stacking against for negative correlation because he has such good stuff and really good strikeout stuff. If he could throw strikes and had any idea where the fuck the ball was going, he would be like an ace. So when he's bad, it's usually just he's not giving you anything to hit and you're just walking around the bases. So like, yes, that's nice in that you're getting more plate appearances. You can get some, RBI opportunities and stuff like that, but you're still in a park that is bad for hitting home runs. You're facing a pitcher that's going to be difficult to hit home runs off of. And it's a 12-game slate where there's a lot of good hitters parks and a lot of mediocre pitching. So it's not a spot where I'm actually getting to the Giants a lot. Maybe like on the night slate, if you're not playing Boyle on the 3-game night slate, then yeah, you probably want to be getting to the Giants. Like I would expect on that slate, a large percentage of my lineups to be either Giant stacks or Boyle. But on the main slate, I think you can just have starts where Boyle walks a bunch of guys, doesn't score a lot of points, especially on DraftKings too, where you're losing points for every walk, but you don't need either side either. So to recap everything, will put the highest projected players on the screen for you. My highest owned pitchers right now, Framber Valdez, Jack Perkins, Sean Manaea are my top 3. My highest owned catchers are Logan O'Hoppe, Edgar Caro, and Ben Rice. At first base, I have Miguel Vargas, Cody Clemens, and Paul Goldschmidt. I do think I will have more Shohei Ohtani once we fix our stuff and get Randy Vasquez in there. At second base, if I could click the right thing, Jazz Chisholm, Ozzie Albies, and Luis Rengifo. At third base, Manny Machado, Alex Bregman, Ryan McMahon. At shortstop, getting to Zach Neto, Hernaiz, and Trevor Story. And then in the outfield, I'm getting to Byron Buxton, Joe Adell, Mickey Moniak, Matt Wallner, Giancarlo Stanton, Jaron Duran, Luis Robert, Taylor Ward, Mike Trout. Pretty solid outfielders there. My highest owned stacks overall, so at least 2 players from a team, are the Angels, the Yankees, the Twins, the Rockies, and the Red Sox. My highest owned 5-mans are the Yankees, the Angels, the Twins, the Braves, and then the White Sox and A's are tied. My home run pick, I will go with most of these guys at the top are cheating. I'll go Brent Rooker. I like the spot for him a lot against Kikuchi in that stadium. That's all I have for you today. Kingmaker said Goldie out. So yeah, that changes things for the Yankees. That's all I have for you today. Thank you for checking out the show. Don't forget, promo code EARLYBIRD gets you 15% off forever, whatever NFL package you want at runthesims.com. Link in the description below. Have a good weekend. Win some money tonight. Win some money over the weekend. Enjoy MMA tomorrow. I'll see you back here on Monday.